Welcome to Leading Minds Revealed, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on how today's top leaders harness the power of mindfulness to conquer the fast-paced, ever-changing world of business. In each episode, we sit down with C-suite executives and leaders who share their strategies for navigating rapid change with skill and clarity. Join us as we uncover the transformative mindsets that drive extraordinary leadership. These insights aren't found in business books, and they'll revolutionize the way you lead. And now, here's your host, Michael Apollo.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. In this episode, we'll explore how leaders can stay grounded and effective in times of massive transformation. You'll learn how to set clear priorities for your teams when everything feels overwhelming, why resilience and mindful pauses matter in leadership, the role of authenticity and innovation in building trust and navigating change. My guest today has built her career at the intersection of technology, business, and leadership. Over the past 8 years at Hitachi Solutions, she has grown from leading customer implementations to now heading the innovation group, where she guides AI-driven solutions and product strategy on a global scale. Hitachi is a $90 billion global technology and innovation company known for leading advances in digital solutions, energy, and infrastructure around the world. Along the way, she's learned directly from the CEO's table, led diverse international teams, and championed a culture of curiosity and safe experimentation. She believes that authentic leadership means being honest about what we know and don't know while empowering teams to innovate. With that, meet my guest, Nonika Bajaj, Industry Cloud Practice Lead at Hitachi. Welcome to the show, Nonika.
Thank you, Michael, for having me. Really excited to have this conversation going today.
Likewise, Nonika. You know, I know you are involved with so many projects right now and implementing change across the organization in some pretty large ways. And there's so much change that leaders are faced with right now. I know you've been experiencing that too. And something I want to start off with is asking you, when everything is changing so rapidly, technologically, what does it take to be an effective leader from your perspective?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Even the answer that's a loaded question too. But I do think a couple of things that keep in mind are that I stay focused around kind of three things. One is clarity, second is candor, and third is care. That I look forward every morning as well, keeping myself centered around that. And I'll give you an example what I mean by that. Clarity in terms of today's market that's changing every second is really important. Clarity on what you're trying to accomplish, what are the three outcomes, three things you can solve, and cutting out every other noise. And that being clear about that with your team and then giving them the autonomy to go figure those out for you. But getting that clarity in, I think that's where I spend my time and focusing on what are the most important priorities that we as a company, as a group, should be focusing on, and being candor with the team I'm leading, with the partners, with teams that I'm collaborating with, to being transparent. This is what we know, and what I don't know, I don't know, right? And how do we convert that we don't know into data points rather than we haven't done? Do a thorough job in your research, but make sure that if you don't know, you're transparent about it, and how help. You'll be surprised how often your partners, your teams come up with something when you're transparent with them. This is, you don't know about it, and what can be the data points that you can collect to make that, uh, you know, not knowing into knowing, and things like that. And that also brings up trust with them. Uh, Third, I do deeply care about my teams that I work with. I think at the end of the day, yes, our goal is to be business centric. Our goal is to being successful as a team, as a company. But at the end of the day, we are also humans. Being caring about their psychological safety, making sure they are in an environment which is enabling them to win, enabling them to succeed is what we focus on. Is it always perfect? No, but it's a growing journey. I think we take together.
Mm. I'd love to start with that clarity first, and I think you've shared, how, really knowing clearly the direction that we want to go with and the key priorities. We look at strategy planning. It's an integral part of leadership. Now, maybe you could share a little bit around sort of the number of teams that you're involved with and that you're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. I just to give a bit of an idea of what we're looking at here. And then, how do you go about that thought process? How do you go about, with a new project emerging or a new direction that's coming your way? To gain that clarity? What would be your process to move through that?
Yeah. To give you a kind of quick scale, we sit around somewhere between 35 to 40 products. That means I lead those 30 to 40 solutions. And you can imagine to stay ahead, you continue to expand to that. We, of course, as a core team interact, but I like to collaborate with innovation happening across Hitachi. So that's kind of my role as well. Of course, that we stay centric into innovating as our core group, but we also want to monetize, make sure other innovators in the company, we are collaborating and reaching out to them, making sure so that number can become really huge really soon. But we also try to, and that's part of my role as well, to making sure I'm reaching out to them. But in all of that, getting to your initial question, how to stay clear and how to stay that centered, um, I'd like to define it as our North Star within that clarity, right? Within that North Star of what are we trying to do? How does, and my North Star is typically at a very, very 10,000 feet level as we are trying to ultimately as businesses trying to enhance your top line and shrink your bottom line. You're trying to make sure you can provide more value to your customers while getting more efficient in delivery at the core of it, right? So that's at the center of it, how we are defining it. But then it's my job to translate into what does it mean for these groups? What does it mean when we are looking at a particular solution or particular innovation? How is it fitting into that vision? And getting to those outcomes is where I spend a lot of energy on, but I try to keep it, like I said, simple. How is it going to make us better? How is it going to provide value to our customer and help them be successful, right? We are successful if our customers are getting successful on that. And ultimately, getting that to when I'm talking to my teams, I also put some constraints on it. Ideation innovation can become quite unhandled quite quickly as well. So as I focus on that clarity and North Star, I stay centered that we have some constraints on it as well. We give our teams to innovate, ideate, but we put some constraints on time boxing. Okay, yes, this is a solution, this is the innovation. It is fitting into our vision. It's fitting into our North Star vision. But how can we fail fast and learn fast? So we try to do it in our time duration, put some constraints together that we will accomplish in this time and look at that from that way.
Mm. Well, and so you're saying that the sort of the impact of your team in terms of the direct number of people can be quite massive. So what would that look like roughly, in terms of the impact of your team that they have on how many employees across the organization?
At man, like I can say definitely close to 500 such teammates that we try to collaborate with across.
Lovely, lovely. So, when you're looking at how you decide what's in scope and what to set aside so your teams can stay focused and confident, you say that, and I really, I find that this is the constant, strategy design question around, get really clear on your North Star and keep returning to that. And it can seem really ambiguous because it can be so far, right? Or it may not feel connected to the specific projects that we're working on. But you can find that alignment, and that's a bit of a tricky process, I find, like, does this project align with the direction that we're going? And so how do you decide what is in scope and and what's out of scope? And when there's just so much that can be built and so much that can be innovated in using today's AI technologies. I know that I've created web pages in seconds now, and even apps that we've been able to prototype it within a couple of hours. Um, yeah, how do you go through the decision making process with your teams?
I do try to talk them through everything cannot be a priority. Like you said, strategy is a vision, but without a focus or a priority, or focus or priority enforces. If you don't have a focus or a set of three priorities, you cannot enforce it. So I do try to stay that. But to your point, how do you prioritize as well, even that in that vision? Um, we do some tactical techniques that I apply with my team when I say that this is going to happen. If everything is a priority, nothing is going to ship. So I don't accept that as a response. But like I said, there are tools that I work with them. There's something age old concept called dot voting or things like that, is where we give three votes to every team member that they can prioritize. So the clear winner on that can is like, right, if I'm not deciding, it's a technical decision, we go from that. Then you have matrices around of priority, which I love, is which is the high business value, and how much effort it's going to take. That those are kind of metrics and tools that we've armed over the years to help us prioritize. But yes, they know I'm going to ask them what's the top priority and how are we constraining ourselves. I won't take that answers, but I encourage my teams to ask questions to each other, challenge each other, um, and use these tools to help come up with those priorities.
Mm. It sounds a little bit of sort of conventional project planning. I know that's something we're coming up soon to our annual strategy planning, and then we have, multiple touch bases quarterly on refining our strategy. But one of the things we do is like, okay, here are the different projects we can be working on. Here's the different products we can be working on, and we do that three dot voting system where we go, okay, everybody has we can vote on which ones, so we put it all up on the board on the whiteboard, and then we can select, and then we highlight, okay, as a team, these are going to be our priorities, right? And we select that one, and then we map out how we're going to execute them. And then really looking at, how can we implement that over time, right? How can we uh, actually deliver on this? And when we look at the projects that we're going to be selecting, we'll look at what has the greatest amount of impact, mapped over the amount of effort. So we'll sort of map that. Okay, you got effort over impact, and I think that almost is like the impact could be the value, right? What can give us the greatest amount of value within the organization, with the impact that we have on people's lives, and then for the least amount of effort, or we try to find that balance. Is that similar to what you're speaking about in terms of sort of that yeah, how you sort of hone in?
Exactly. Think about through in a little bit more complexities, a little bit more factors, but exactly that's the process you just need to learn to scale, right? That's the process which you're talking about business's impact. I'd also throw it in change management, how much change, how much skilling I would need for my teams to get there. So think about that corporate hat as you grow up, as you grow in that kind of team set, but you're spot on. Exactly the same core principles.
Yeah, exactly. Because I guess the change management, especially when you're impacting hundreds of employees and the teams, it's as how do we have the skill? How do we bring forward the changes that might bring within and across these teams and across the organization? I think those are some really great insights.
And actually, a good example, just to finish that thought on that business value you and I talked about and the change, there was actually a study that 80% of the initiatives don't see the business value intended. And the key criteria for that is because they didn't put the leg room of how long it'll take to everybody to actually adopt it, the change to really sink in. Tool was ready, but till teams utilize it, there's no value provided to it, right? So there's always that reverse bell curve on that value versus change adoption. So I think always to keep it centric as well as you're thinking about these things.
Mhm. And so you were speaking about experimentation, like fail fast, right? How do you scope that? Like, how do you think about, we're going to either innovate this product or feature, or implement this new approach within the organization or externally as well? What would be a good way to approach experimentation, both from like thinking about it, how to think about it as a leader? Like, how are you thinking about that experimentation? Like, and then what would that look like from a practical perspective? And maybe you could provide a bit of an example around that.
Yeah. How I think about it as is you gather your data, and I do ask questions before we are experimenting, right? We do get together. You can have a 2-page brief. We used to call it as like everybody gets together, look at it, that this is what we are trying to accomplish. Ask that questions that you are sure what you're trying to come out of it, and then put some constraints on it. For me, a good constraint in a technical space is to have a time box experimentation, right? Have it to 2 to 3 weeks time box. Let's experiment how it's going to look like, right? To your earlier point, we can spin off tools faster now. We can have prototypes done way sooner. All the things that we need to proof out, that fail fast concept. And many a times you would be surprised, as much we do that 2 page or whatever, that upfront research, we do figure out in that 2 week POCs, no, it's not going to be viable, right? So that allows us to fail fast, learn from it. And I am a big believer in documenting, saving those artifacts as well. So you lesson learned. So you have an archive to look back as well on that failure or on that as well. And if it's success, given that we will take it to the full cycle of innovation.
I love that. The reason why I love that is it's so important to time box. I think we're investing time and effort to deploy a strategy. And sometimes we can have some of the greatest ideas, right? And sometimes the initial designs that we have can seem simple, but they're massively complex or complicated in ways that we can't anticipate. And then finding a way where we can prototype rapidly in the near term. And then the failure doesn't come from it not working per se, because it could if we had all the resources in the world and all the time in the world, the greatest ideas could bear fruit, right? It could be amazing. But the reality is that we don't have that, right? We are working with limited resources, limited time. And then so how can we test that those assumptions as fast as possible, right? And I think that that's really helpful for me because we've had multiple times where, yeah, I think of right now, we had this really large enterprise project that we at first didn't seem so large. It seemed like quite a simple platform that we can roll out. And as we started going through it throughout the year, it just grew and grew and grew. And then we realized after 1 year that, it's not as viable as we thought it was. But if we by implementing something like what you were sharing there, we could actually see, okay, does this prototype have legs? What have we learned in this rapid prototyping phase? Is this something that could even be viable? I love that. Now, um, you know, you have so many teams, like you said, 30 to 40, it seems, various different initiatives in tow that you're supporting right now and have input in. How do you sustain yourself? What does your day look like, and what do you need to do to support with your focus and your resilience? to sustain that clarity that you need and that ability to show up and care?
Yeah, good question. That's a good question. I think I live by three kind of core ideas. One is breathe, second is box, and third is bias to action. So I think as they're self kind of explanatory a little bit, I'll get a little bit more context what it means to me. I always remember to breathe. There are stressful situations, there are constant which gets to you. So make sure you're breathing, stepping away, getting a perspective on it, and staying focused. Second is box. I constantly remind myself, it's on my Friday notes to my teams. Focus box what you can control, box out of box which you cannot control. That gets you centered, that gets you action oriented, and hence my third one is to bias to action. What action can I take now which has the most impact this week? I start my week with that. What actions can I be focusing on? And hence the same thing I coach my teams to do as well.
Mm, very interesting. So what I'm hearing there is there's breathe, box, and bias to action. And if I can sort of, reframe that in a way that sort of aligns to my view, is sort of on a daily basis, find ways to provide yourself with perspective, to take that moment to breathe. Uh, Breathe is a great sort of anchor. The breath is always there. And and this is one way to stay grounded in the moment. Box, this is sort of looking at like what's in your realm of control and what's outside of what you can control. But I think also I'm sort of viewing it as what are the things that are in scope of what you're going to be focusing on right now, and we're out of that. What's out of that scope, so that doesn't sort of creep in. Would you say does that align on the box side?
Yes. And also expand it to sometimes we're all humans with the news around, with everywhere the buzz around, the focus can get overwhelming. So I try to tell myself also to focus on how in this vision are we focused to win? Is my team focused to win? And let other things silent for a while. I think the way media and the way some of these changes come to us is overwhelming. So I try to do that as well to make sure what can we control and what are the things we cannot control in that order. And also that also can control, okay, what you can control and then what's in your scope. So yes, to that point, to what you were mentioning about in scope as well.
Great. And then there's the bias to action, which is within this week. What are your highest priorities? Like, what is it that you want to focus on? And you know, I I, I think it's really timely what you're sharing around the box concept, because you know I've been speaking to a few of our guests here and a number of other leaders. There's this sort of AI anxiety that's happening. There's the anxiety about the geopolitical realities that are happening, the instability, etc. And our attention can be pulled, like you were saying, to so many different directions that we forget that we actually have a choice of what we focus on. And and one of the ways we can reclaim that choice is by being really intentional on what are we focusing on. What is that frame of focus? And I think we almost need to, because that box is just this wants to expand all the time, and with new ideas, new technologies, new potential for some people, or new worries, whatever that might be. And then by just constantly reframing that, just checking in, okay, where am I right now? What is within my frame of focus? Um, I think that could be really, really helpful. Uh, and so what practices help you do that? Is this something that is sort of an ongoing reflection that you have? You sort of notice scope creep coming in, different ideas coming in, or even just for yourself, you notice your mind getting pulled to, new news and information, and do you just actively reflect on saying, okay, what is it I'm focusing on right now? Or are there different practices that you do to help you gain that perspective?
I think it's more towards every day as well. As I end my day, I try to keep whenever my regular hours end, it's back to back meetings for all of us typically. And then we are unboxing myself for 45 minutes as well towards the end of the day. I like to get all my action items for that day, which I thought were valuable points that I should take action on. I make sure they're out. I tried to, and that point, I try to box myself to your point. I think you will remember now my physical analogy of that box expanding. But I try to say that, okay, I so many things, but can I control? Can I take action on any of them right now? Is it relevant? Right. So it's a visual representation in my mind when I'm saying, okay, these are things we can control, and these are the things I don't have control over right now or today. And in that control situation, what are the most critical actions that can provide the maximum value? So try to be very diligent about it every day and make sure I'm looking at that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's similarly to me, I'll always make sure to have my key priorities for the day mapped out. In the morning, I'll take that time to just reflect, okay, what are the highest value action items I need to take? And I'll map them out and I'll do everything I can to take care of those. And then just knowing that things are just going to naturally come, right? Questions, inquiries, meetings, etc. But then just returning to that as a simple daily anchor, and then rechecking it, because sometimes what I'll do is I'll map out all these action items I need to do for the day, and then I'll actually prune them back. Okay, out of all of these, because usually it grows to 10, 15, etc. I'll prune it back, going, okay, what are those top 3 to 5 that are the highest priorities and that I can actually get to. Um, so yeah, so I think that's a great one that we can take forward there. And you were talking about candor, and so how does that come into the conversation here with your teams? What does that look like in a team setting, and maybe you could, especially when it comes to maybe that's the discussion around what's in scope and perhaps what's out of scope. Maybe you could share an example of what that could look like.
Yeah, those are interesting team conversations, right? Everyone has their perspective and why they're pushing for that idea. But I do want to call it out that candor goes hand in hand with trust. And you have to be very sensitive about it that you are providing your teams that autonomy to operate as well, along with it's a blameless learning. So I'm talking about all those terms, but they have to go hand in hand to bring that transparency and trust culture. So it's allowing them to share. And in that, we are all transparent. We are honest about it. Okay, we didn't know it. We discussed about it, or this is what I don't know about, and being trustworthy in that relation. But I think that your honest transparency, bringing as a leader, does open the door for them too. So I do share, for example, recent idea comes to mind where I was transparent and I went back to them, hey, this is what I presented, and I got a ton of feedback. I missed, we had certain assumptions that got invalidated. Here's my follow up items, and here's what I'm going to go back with. So I hope they learned out of this that didn't know the answer, didn't think about certain angles, and we got ton of feedbacks from our board or executives. And I'm taking it as opportunity to closely look at those follow-up items and go back even more rigorous this time. And so I hope they learn from that. But I gave a long answer to that. In short, that starts with a simple conversation of leaders sharing their own stories, being transparent where they succeed, how did they do it, continue to that build conversational trust within the teams, that they trust each other. That comes from kind of doing less learning. That is this process we are trying to fix. How do we grow, not people that we are trying to fix here. So that's how I think about focusing my team around that.
Yeah, it seems almost like very skillful languaging and communication too, right? I like this concept of blameless learning, right? I haven't heard that before. And, you know, the reality is we're all learning and we're learning together. And I heard recently as well, especially with all these AI technology, I was actually listening to this one company who released, it's called Descript. They released an AI video editing platform. And they had the engineers who developed this platform, it's a great one. I recommend people to check it out. We use it at the Mindful Institute quite a bit now. And what we found is that in one of the recent presentations, the engineer was saying, to be completely honest, we have no idea what this platform can do. And literally, the best way that we can work with this piece of technology is by continuous experimentation. And it's going to grow, it's going to evolve, and it's going to learn in ways that we'll know down the road. And it's sort of, the speed at which AI is innovating is sort of making me think about technology, just all technologies and how to approach that skillfully, just having that openness, that sense of learning mindset. I like this sort of concept of blameless learning, especially within team settings. And then as leaders, especially, is how can we continuously illustrate, just show by our presence and our speech and the stories that we share what that looks like, to have that honest transparency and to show how we have experimented and failed and made mistakes and we're learning from it. And that's what we want to adopt. We want to adopt that continual sort of blameless learning approach. And you've also shared around safety, creating that sense of care within your teams. Um, How does that look like, on, what's have been some of your learnings and how to create that sense of how to convey that care and how to create that sense of safety within your teams, especially as you create this blameless learning culture?
Yeah. That's one area where I spend my evenings walking and thinking about growing as a leader as well, for sure, is that psychological safety that's become much more challenging in the environments we are in now, right? And I'll be transparent about that. The the pace at which AI is changing, our environment is changing, is that psychological safety is top of mind for everyone, right? And how do you ensure that in an honest leader way? To your point, how I stay focused is making sure that I provide them that learning opportunity, but also provide them with the detailed feedback. As a leader, one thing you can do is for sure provide them clarity on what you're trying to accomplish, set the priorities, let them do, let them have the autonomy to operate on their own, but also then provide them the detailed feedback. As a leader, it's really critical to spend that time on the feedback that could help them improve and achieve their own goals. So listen carefully what they're trying to achieve, how they'll be successful, provide a detail, spend the time in my evenings and my morning walks. Okay, how could that teammate could have done differently? Did he look for the skill he was trying to enhance on? Did he accomplish? What are the things I can coach him on? Can I pair him with somebody who is great in that? I no way declare that I would have those ideas for them, but I can connect them to the teammates who have the skill they are trying to enhance, right? So to make sure I do focus on those things as well to provide them that psychological safety. So all of us can focus on as we are in this era, to continue to learn and to learn, make sure that you are getting a feedback on that learning. You try to experiment it, and that feedback is authentic. And you're getting that from the leader. So even if I'm pairing up with someone, I try to tell them that, hey, take a second to provide them a feedback so they can actually grow.
Mm. It almost adds to the last C of your 3C leadership model here at this in this time of change, right? It's like change, another C right there, right? To help with change, we need clarity, candor, and care, and I would almost attach compassion. It almost seems like care from what I'm hearing for you is really thinking on how you can help, how you can support this, the people that you work with, the teams that you serve, that you support as a leader. And it comes from, a couple of the ways that what I was hearing is you can do it by providing very direct feedback, that sense of clarity around of how things are going, and then looking as well on how they can be mentored. How can they be supported? Where can they get resources to help them grow? And you know, last I was speaking with you, you mentioned that mentorship was a really it really shaped your journey from engineering into leadership. And maybe could you share a bit of how what different kinds of mentorship that supported you and your day and their role, the impact that they played?
Yeah, little I knew back then how they will impact me. Uh, all I knew was I was just asking Christians back then, right? How about this one and all that? And that led me to certain mentorship opportunities. I was fortunate that my leader selected me to provide with that. But over years, I would say three things that became clear is there's a peer mentorship. And I truly believe that peer mentorship can try to help you, can actually help you a ton. Second is your skill mentorship. And third is your sponsor mentorship. And I'll try to, give you an example. Fortunately, I was lucky to get the sponsor mentorships as well. And at that time, I was looking for skills as well. So I was not clear on how this works. So my coaching and my advice to, here is clarify what you're trying to accomplish and fit them in peer mentorship, mentor, and your sponsor. I'll start with the sponsor layer. Sponsor layer is that highest layer, is where leaders who are 2 to 3 layers up than where you are in your career, and they are in the rooms that they can provide you the opportunities, the vision which you don't have access to or don't have clarity or visibility on right now, right? And those are um, 2 3 levels up. So then you actually broadens your horizon a ton. You don't even know about what you don't know yet, right, in their career. But then your next level is your skill mentor. Your skill mentor is a layer above than you typically, who have recently gone through your journey, but they've honed into that skills. Either you're trying to go into deep technical, you're trying to go in public speaking or leadership or whatever you may have, right? So look for that person who you can relate to. You know what? This is the job I would like to do, right? To look at that layer as your mentor layer, skill layer. Third layer is your peer group or your cycle. That's really critical to bring that peer group as well, because you are facing the similar challenges and you need to find a better way of um, partner thought leadership in that, right? You would be amazed at how well that turns out to be, that all of you succeed together. So use that peer relationship as well as being your mentor avenue. So yes, like I said, I now have all layers. At one point, I think started with, fortunate enough, I was started with somebody who was really high up back then. And it totally exploded my horizon of what I was seeing from engineering. This product was so important. How can it not work? But when I looked at it from a CEO table, it turned my vision upside around, that how your messaging changes, to which business group you are talking to, how your um, what's in it for them, kind of that conversation changes, right? From your engineering thought process to change to business value to getting to their bottom line, vision expands as well. So that's kind of my full scale vision on mentorship.
That that really interfaces with um, my view on the support that can be so beneficial to so many of us. This community of that we can bring about us as individuals, as leaders, having the sponsors, having the skill mentors, and then having our sort of peer networks as well. And um, it's important to take our perspective beyond what we think is possible to get that reflection. Conventionally in communities from a long time ago, there would be elders that would provide us with perspective that we did not even know was possible. And then there would be those around us with skills that we needed that can help us that can teach us those skills and how to use them. And then of course we have those that are directly around us that can help us sort of go get through the everyday and learn from the similar challenges that we face. And it could seem it's just so valuable, and it's such a helpful reminder to look for that, right? And thank you for sharing that, and um you you grew up in Delhi in a family where education and curiosity were very central. And what influence did that provide you in how you lead today?
Yeah. It's such a long time ago now, but yes. I think how I grew up and central to our household was key things that come to mind is we were always centered around learning. Our priority was, what are you learning today? Exciting about sharing that. Exciting about what was art of possible. My parents were an educationalist, and I think the first moment when my mom wrote about me in her PhD dissertation in her book that was published and shared across the country, and she referenced me, kind of opened up at a very early age that it is possible, that it is possible to continue to learn. And as being a woman growing up in India, that was developing country with so many norms, and her pushing that boundary and me seeing that happen, that yes, it can do it for you, I think stayed with me. And so that whole centered around learning culture, and I'm big on resilience as well. As I think you and I chatted about when we briefly chatted before, is continue to go, get back up and try again and again and again. Wasn't perfect. And I had challenges as I took so many roles with being communication, leading to different teams, coming from that engineering technical background, going into purely business, and then coming back to sort of leading these. And how do I transition? That took a lot of turns. I wasn't successful the first time. I wasn't successful in every role I did, but I was ready to, quickly come back and try again. What did I miss? And kind of that culture that comes up from my early childhood of saying that it's possible, getting ingrained in me. So I do believe that we should be sending that messages to our teams, to our, as a community, that we need to be centered, that this is all possible for all of us, to keep trying.
So great to bring your mother into this conversation because of it seems like such an impact that she's had. And for better or worse in families, we as leaders, the way that we show up, uh, a big part of that is the legacy that our parents and our ancestors have provided us, the experiences, their collective experiences that are very much present in how we interact with others, how we think about the world, as how we think about what's possible. And I think it's so important for us to heal, for us to reflect and to explore what's what learnings did we have, and what experiences have we had and our parents have had, and our ancestors that they've had, and how they live on within us to inform how we show up, and how maybe we could refine how we show up in ways that could be more effective. And um, we've covered like quite a range right now, even just in our time here and together in this episode. But when you reflect on this journey that you've had from your childhood and the influence that your parents have had, to the mentors, to now leading these teams, this age of massive growth and complexity and opportunity and challenge. What's one thing that, what are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of every day focusing on bringing the best of myself. Seems very, that's, yes, we do it every day, but I think doing it on a consistent basis. Yes, I had a long term goal in order to be a leader. Yes. But how I kind of see it now is bringing your best self every day to work, to every day to what I do as a parent. Uh, has been very satisfying, and I'm kind of see myself as being proud that every day that bringing best myself made me resilient, and I'm proud of getting better at every day, getting better um every day, right? As learning as a human, as learning as an individual, as learning as a leader.
Mm. Well, I think we've definitely heard that you've definitely been on this continual path of bringing the best of yourself to all these moments in all the growth and the transition that you've had, and also now to the teams that you lead. And um, I'm just really grateful for this time that we've had together to explore this journey, Nonika, uh, and learning more around how we could really think about in a day-to-day lives to show up with clarity, to bring candor into our discussions, and really to embrace that caring approach, that caring, compassionate approach with our teams, and what that could look like on a day-to-day basis too. I think we've uncovered some very practical approaches on how we can approach our days and our weeks, thanks to through your experience and wisdom from all the work that you've done. And I think it's just a very powerful conversation. And thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, Michael.
My pleasure. And so this brings us to another episode of the Leading Minds Revealed. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this has been an impactful conversation here, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Leading Minds Revealed podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.